What's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com, your home for the 2020 World Series champion Los Angeles Dodgers. It feels good to say that after the stretch of baseball we've seen. Let's remember, 2020 World Series champions. That's Daniel Starkand. I'm Jeff Spiegel. Daniel, they're in the midst of a slump, but Sunday they put up a ton of runs. The offense breaks out. How much did that change your mood just seeing the team score a bunch of runs?
Yeah, I mean it was good to be happy at the end of a game for once. I feel like it had been a while since, not only had they won a game, but since the offense really came alive like that. 16 runs is just ridiculous. Two grand slams in the first 2 innings of the game. So it was cool to have some fun for a change, but when we're still looking at the grand scheme of things, this team still isn't playing great
Yeah.
baseball yet. So hopefully they can start turning that around, starting with yesterday's win.
I did think Nomar made an interesting point on the broadcast, kind of before the game. He called this beforehand, said, "Hey, you know what? Maybe having this guy making his major league debut, you've never seen him before. They probably don't have a ton of scouting." He said maybe that helps because these guys don't worry about the scouting reports. They don't worry about overthinking it. Just go up there, see the ball, hit the ball. That kind of seemed like that's what happened. Obviously,
Yeah.
Mookie Betts didn't have the best day. He hit the ball hard a bunch of times, but you do see guys like Pollock and Beatty with huge days. Chris Taylor reached base like 6 times. So I did think it felt like when AJ Pollock hit his home run and he's sort of screaming around the bases, it felt like, okay, hopefully something just clicked for these guys. Something just
Yeah.
changed. The monkey got off their back.
Yeah, it definitely feels like a big weight was lifted off their shoulders. But like you mentioned, it's definitely better to see a guy making his major league debut than Corbin Burns,
Yeah.
who's been one of the best pitchers in baseball. Um, but yeah, I mean that first inning specifically, they were close to getting no runs. They're lucky the pitcher missed the bag with his foot
Yeah.
on Beatty's little grounder there, or else who knows where that game would have went. But yeah, I mean it was good if you could see it like visually in their eyes, just how good of a feeling it was to put up runs like that and win a game like that. So yeah, hopefully that's the start of a turnaround here. We got the Cubs coming up this week, and then the Angels. So there's some winnable games in there for sure. But yeah, definitely Sunday was a good start.
Yeah. Yeah. And you make a great point. That's the beauty of baseball. Matt Beatty hits a ground ball that goes about 16 feet, it feels like, but just
Yeah.
far enough. The pitcher misses the bag, and that clicks everything. So, well, hey, we got a good show for you today. We've got a lot planned. We're going to start off here by talking about the Dodgers as we look at they've lost 10 of their last 14. How concerned are we about the starting pitching? How concerned are we about the bullpen? How concerned are we about the lineup? Again, that's not assuming we're concerned about any of those things, but it's just sort of a check in point in the season and say, where do we feel like things are going with those three things? We'll do a little bit of big deal, no deal, heavy emphasis on injury updates that the Dodgers have gotten over the last few weeks. And then we'll end by talking about Dustin May goes down. What does that mean for the Dodgers? Who are the number 5 starter candidates? That type of thing. And at the end, if we've got time, we'll talk a little bit about the Cubs and the Angels coming up. But let's talk about big picture. Let's zoom out. Let's do a check in. As we had mentioned, the Dodgers, including yesterday's win, have lost 10 of their last 14. Before Sunday, they were averaging just 3.38 runs per game. They had 8 of that 13-game stretch in which they scored three runs or less. And yet, as somebody pointed out on Twitter, a stat I could not believe, even before the plus 12 they got yesterday in run differential, the Dodgers had the best run differential in baseball even before Sunday. So, Daniel, I want to work through the roster a little bit and just get your thoughts and say, how concerned are we about these different areas? I'll start with the easiest one, starting pitching on a scale of 1 to 10, or 0 to 10, maybe in this case. How concerned are you about the Dodgers starting pitching right now?
Yeah, it's definitely a one as far as the starting pitching goes, and it's only a one because Dustin May just got hurt and they don't have a clear replacement for him at the moment. We'll get to that later down the line, but other than that, starting pitching has been awesome for the Dodgers all season. The way it's looking, they got 4 legit aces.
Yeah.
And Walker Bueller hasn't even looked like the best version of himself yet. So as the season goes along, he's probably going to get even better. But all 4 of those guys have been awesome. Trevor Bauer has been everything we'd hoped he'd be. Clayton Kershaw, the talks of his demise are coming to an end because he still looks like the same guy he's always looked like.
Yeah.
And Julio Urias, I mean, he's proven that he's a legit starting pitcher. He had another great outing yesterday. I know it was kind of low pressure with all the runs that the offense gave him, but he gave them some much needed length. We know how taxed the bullpen was. For him to get through 7 there was absolutely huge. And his strikeout numbers are up. He struck out 10 yesterday. So starting pitching is the least of my worries when it comes to this team. They still have the best rotation in baseball as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, pre-May's injury is probably a 0, I think, for both of
Yeah.
us. I think post-May's
it would
injury...
be negative if that was possible.
And honestly, it might still be a 0 if Tony Gonsolin were healthy, if David Price were healthy. Again, we're going to get into some of those timelines. Some of the guys that could be fifth starters, by the way: Andre Jackson, Mike Kickham, Mitch White, Jimmy Nelson, Edwin Uceda, Gerardo Carrillo, Dennis Santana, Josiah Gray. So we're going to talk about that at the end. That's a little teaser there to sort of get a breakdown on those guys. But yeah, I mean, you look at the numbers. Dodgers currently number 1 among all starting pitching staffs in wins above replacement. They have a 2.71 ERA across 29 starts. I think one of the more impressive things, they're averaging almost 6 innings pitched per start. Now, if you take out Uceda's start, which was 2 innings, and May's, which was 1.2, that number is probably closer to 6 1/3, which is remarkable for a team that is not historically known for getting length out of their starting pitchers. But they've been fantastic as a staff. 10.42 strikeouts per 9 compared to 1.46 walks per 9. I mean, most people will tell you, if you want to know who the best pitchers are in baseball, look at their strikeout to walk ratio. I mean, the Dodgers starters are at like 7-1, which is absolutely insane. If you look at individuals, Clayton Kershaw, 5th in baseball in wins above replacement. Urias, 13th. Buehler, 30th. Bauer, 42nd. May was surprising. He was way down at 75th. Obviously, one shortened start can hurt that. But I do want to talk a little bit about Urias, because you mentioned him. He was fantastic on Sunday. We talked about in the postgame on Saturday, hey, they need length. They need him to do what he's been doing. He's been good, but somewhat inconsistent. Some amazing starts and some pretty average starts. But he's been fantastic. 4-0 on the season, 10 strikeouts per 9, 1.43 walks per 9. So again, you want to talk about a strikeout to walk ratio, 2.87 ERA, 2.82 FIP. Some of the stuff, the strikeout percentage is up from 20% last year to 28% this year, while his walk rate is down from 8% to 4%. He's had 3 starts of 7 innings pitched in his career. All 3 are this season. And then Fangraphs does a game score. 2 of the top 3 games of his career are from this year, 3 of his top 5. So I know that's a lot of numbers, but to me, that's what's amazing. He's striking out more guys. He's walking less guys. He's missing more bats. He has one of the highest chase rates in all of baseball. He's going longer. I mean, I don't know if there's been a guy who it's been more obvious to watch him make the jump than what we're watching in Urias right now.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a guy who we've known about for since he was 16 years old. Basically, he was this phenom prospect. He came up when he was 19. And what we're seeing right now is he's finally living up to the potential that we've all known he's had. I mean, he was great in the postseason last year, so it's not like this is anything really new. Like we knew this was in him. But to see him do it, it's not a full season yet, but how he's looked so far, it definitely looks like it's sustainable as long as he could stay healthy. And yeah, he looks great. You mentioned the strikeout numbers. A lot of that, I think, is attributed to his slurve, or whatever you want to call it, that he kind of figured out in the middle of last season and has been just great ever since. That pitch again yesterday was looking unhittable. You mentioned the low walk numbers. That's key right there. He's pounding the zone, throwing a ton of strikes, and that's also why he's getting deeper into games, because he's able to keep that pitch count down. Something we've seen that's been an issue with him in the past, specifically last season, is he really struggled in the first inning for whatever reason. I honestly couldn't tell you, but there was a lot of first innings where he'd be leaving with 25, 30 pitches, and it's really hard to recover from that and get deep into games. So he's solved his first inning demons, whatever they were, and he's getting deep into games, which has been huge for this team.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the pitch count. I can't remember a guy that has done what Urias did. So yesterday, 10 strikeouts on 90 pitches. A couple weeks ago, 11 strikeouts on 88 pitches. I mean, you just don't see those numbers. Typically, when a guy is in double digits for strikeouts, you're talking about 110 pitches because of the amount of pitches that it takes. But that's what he's doing. And I think the key, you hinted at it, is pounding the strike zone. He is throwing more strikes, a higher percentage of strikes than he ever has in his career, probably one of the highest marks, if not the highest mark in the league. And what it has done is he's reducing the walks. He's getting more strikes, obviously, but then the whiff rate or this chase rate, excuse me, guys are chasing out of the zone because if the scouting report on you is everything is in the zone, everything is in the zone, when you see a pitch that looks like it's going to be in the zone, you
Yep.
assume it's going to stay in the zone. And then
Yep.
the breaking ball that you mentioned moves out of the zone. And so it kind of works both ways. You get obviously less walks because you're in the zone, and then you end up getting more whiffs outside of the zone because guys just go up pre-recording in their mind, I'm swinging at this. So again, it's fantastic. As you said, it's kept the pitch. I mean, we're talking about a guy who's gone 7 innings 3 times, 6 innings, a couple other times, and yet he's never thrown more than 95 pitches this season.
Yeah.
Like, he's a starting pitcher. Urias, if they needed it, could probably get up to 110, which would get you an extra. He could have gone 8 in any of those starts. They're playing it conservative with him, which obviously, as we've seen with Dustin May, is the right move to do. Not to say they did anything wrong with May, but there's no reason to push it, especially yesterday. Like, get Mike Kickham in there to just literally mop up innings. I mean, that was the definition of mop up duty. But he's been amazing. And again, Clayton Kershaw is 5th in baseball in wins above replacement. Like people aren't even talking about him. Everyone wants to talk. It's kind of one of those things where everyone wants to talk about sort of the new hot thing, and everyone wants to talk about Dustin May. Everyone wants to talk about Urias because they're making the jump. And then you've got Kershaw over here, at age 33 years old, having a 2.09 ERA, like in 6 starts, averaging almost 6.5 innings per outing, 9 strikeouts per 9, 1.16 walks per 9. I mean, he's having one of the best seasons of his career, and it's sort of like under the radar.
Yeah. His pinch hitting numbers aren't as great as his pitching stats, but yeah, he's been awesome. I think we kind of exaggerated. We were a little concerned about him during spring training and after his opening day start, just because he didn't look like his usual self. But it's important to remember it was early in the season. Like things pick up as the season goes along. And honestly, since that first start, he's been awesome in pretty much all of them, outside of like one Padres start where he just gave up the 2 homers to Tatis. But other than that, he's been awesome. You mentioned, the low ERA 2.0 or 2.05 or whatever it is. That's something that we've seen from him in the past. We weren't sure if it was still there. We thought at this point in his career, he's more of a high 2s, low 3s ERA guy. But hey, it's Clayton Kershaw at the end of the day. So I think he could keep this up all year. And if he does, he'll be in the Cy Young conversation once again, which is just insane.
Yeah, last 5 starts, 37 strikeouts, just 4 walks. 4 of those starts, 1 earned run or less. He had 1 earned run in 1 game, three with 0 earned runs. And then, of course, the Padres game that you mentioned, where he gave up just 5 hits, but 3 of them were home runs. And so he's been absolutely unbelievable and giving the Dodgers exactly what they need. As I said, if you're looking at where his ERA, where his FIP, where that kind of stuff sits as far as career numbers, it's one of the best. I mean, his 2.09 ERAs would be his best dating back to 2016. The FIP of 2.49, same thing, would be the best dating back to 2016. And that's with getting shelled on opening day, that's with that start. So it's not like, oh man, this isn't sustainable. It's like, even if you take what he did in the first game and kind of smooth it out over the next 5 starts, like everything he's done seems to be sustainable. If there's a guy I'm not worried about as far as, knock on wood, getting injured and that kind of thing, Kershaw, he's a vet. Like, he knows what his body is capable of. He has the best sense. So all that to say, the starting pitching, we're not concerned. The Dodgers have been amazing. We didn't even talk about Buehler. We didn't even talk about Bauer. Both of them have been amazing. If they were on another team other than the Dodgers, they'd have an 8-minute segment all to themselves. But they're on the Dodgers, so they're the 3rd and 4th best starting pitchers they have right now.
Yeah, what they're doing what's expected of them.
Exactly.
So yeah.
Well, let's move on to the bullpen, where things might get a little bit more interesting. I'll start with sort of the headline here. Dodgers pitchers who are currently on the injured list: Caleb Ferguson on the 60-day, Canley on the 60-day, Knebel on the 60-day, Gonsolin, Gratterall, Kelly, May, and Price all on the injured list. That's 8 of the 25 pitchers who are on the 40-man roster. 8 of 25 are on the injured list. Bellinger, McKinstry, obviously, on the offensive side. So, scale of 1 to 10, how concerned are you with the Dodger bullpen? And I guess maybe I'll ask you 2 questions. How concerned are you with the Dodger bullpen right now? And how concerned are you with the Dodger bullpen sort of 4 months from now?
Yeah, I'd say right now it's definitely a bigger concern than long term. So I'm right in the middle, like a 5, I'd say right now. Long term, probably like a 2 or 3. Just because it's mainly has to do with all the injuries. Like
Yeah.
when you just mentioned 8 guys on the IL, that really puts your depth to the test. Like you have a 9-man bullpen and you got 8 guys on the IL. That means you basically got a whole another bullpen that's in there right now that you
Yeah.
weren't expecting. So it is a bit of concern in the short term, but when you're talking long term, like these are things that could be addressed. Like there's a trade deadline, down the road at the end of July. The Dodgers have plenty of prospects. There will be plenty of relievers available. They could go get one of them. They could go get two, three if they want.
Yeah.
Like you could address that at the deadline. That's why I don't think it's a huge concern long term. And you'll see by the end of July, you'll have a better sense of who is healthy, who's not healthy, who's maybe not healthy right now, but will be by the playoffs. Like you'll have a better sense of that. I think it's still too early right now, but for the short term, I think it's a little concerning just because they've played so many extra inning games. Arms are getting taxed earlier than you'd hope for.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a concern at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the team stats, they currently have the 12th best ERA among bullpens, which I'm sure is a massive surprise to the average fan who's expecting that to be higher. And another number that's interesting, because I was with you, I'm like, man, they're just wearing these guys out. The Dodgers are actually one of they're 24th in innings pitched as far as the bullpen, and that goes back to what we said that the starters are averaging 6 innings. So that's been nice. But yeah, I mean, they're an average major league bullpen right now. I'm actually probably more concerned than you. I would say a 6. And I think that's kind of a hybrid of right now and long term. And here's the reason. I'm looking at the bullpen and guys that are coming back. I'm not expecting Knebel to come back. Obviously, we know Ferguson is out. Canley is out. So as far as guys that like a month from now, 2 months from now, 3 months from now, you expect to be healthy, this is the current state of the Dodger bullpen. I would classify sort of your high leverage arms being Kenley Jansen, Blake Trinan, Victor Gonzalez, and David Price. You've got 4 guys in the high leverage category. You got 4 guys in the next, probably filling out the bullpen category, which would be Scott Alexander, Brusdar Graterol, Joe Kelly, and Jimmy Nelson. And then beyond that, you've got Mitch White, Alex Vesia, Dennis Santana, and Scott Clevenger as sort of your other 4 guys. Those are the only 12 who I presume will be available at some point this season. And obviously, I'm with you. I would expect a trade to be made, but if I'm just looking at this group, that's not a group that I think I could go win a World Series with. Jansen, Trinan, Gonzalez, Price is not good enough as a group of 4 high leverage guys. Now, I think the wild card there is David Price, because we've seen moments this year with David Price where you look at him and say, oh my goodness, this guy could be your go get me 5 outs in the 8th and 9th inning of a World Series game. Like I've seen that kind of upside from him. Jansen, I think we understand what we're in for. It's a roller coaster. Some days he's going to be amazing. Some days he's not. I think Trinan is good, but not great. I think he's a bit overrated in the minds of some folks. He just gives up a lot of base hits, a lot of walks, a lot of contact. I think Victor Gonzalez has been really good, but they clearly don't seem to trust him on the level of these other guys. Like he just gets thrown in sort of low leverage situations, it feels like, and it's never sort of more than just, hey, go get us 2 or 3 out. So with that group is what worries me. Obviously, Joe Kelly could be a wild card. Jimmy Nelson, we've hoped for. You hope that the trajectory is up. He has been good, but not great this year. Graterol, again, I think a guy that's a little overrated in people's minds. He just hasn't ever proven he can do it. And then you have Scott Alexander, who's like a low ceiling, high floor guy. He's been solid. Like it's almost like I trust him because at least there's predictability there. And so if we're ruling out a trade, I mean, and we're not ruling out, but just looking like we can't assume that they're just going to, for the purposes of this exercise, that Josh Hader is getting dropped into this group or something like that.
Yeah.
Am I wrong to be concerned about a bullpen of Jansen, Trinan, Gonzalez, Price, Alexander, Graterol, Kelly, and Nelson? Am I wrong to think that that's not a World Series caliber bullpen?
I think the concern is a little overblown. Like you say, it's not a World Series bullpen. We just saw last year all those guys were all good in the postseason, and the Dodgers won the World Series. Now they did have some help from let's say Julio Urias was a huge help to the bullpen, which you can't really consider a possibility for this year with May going down and Gonsolin uncertain. Like Julio's in the starting rotation. You can't include him as part of the bullpen right now. Although who knows, in October we'll see. But I think it's a little bit overblown. But at the same time, what you just listed is they have a lot of decent to good arms, but no truly elite ones, which is basically the same thing we talked about in the offseason. like this bullpen has some depth, and we're seeing that depth being put to the test. But I think guys have filled in pretty well for the most part. But we haven't really seen anyone from that bullpen really step up and say, "Hey, I'm the guy
Yeah.
here. I'm the guy you could trust in every big situation." So I think that's definitely a bit concerning. Ideally, you'd like to have that one guy who, in the biggest spot of the game, you need an out here, you need a couple outs here. That's the guy you could go to.
All right, a bit of a technical difficulty there, but we are back. Daniel, just to pick up on that conversation, the bullpen. I guess I hear you on all the things of, at the end of the day, you're right. This is the bullpen that they had last year. We're currently not projecting any of the starting pitchers, a guy like Gonsolin or a guy like May, to be able to help, especially if May, obviously we don't know what to do with that. Gonsolin, we'll see what that is. I think some of the concern is a guy like Trinan, who I trusted the most last year, who I just haven't seen much from this year. And he is getting a little bit older. And so at some point you say, is there going to be a drop off? Maybe it's just early season stuff, but I guess he's the one I'm most concerned about when it comes to looking at this group.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, he wouldn't be giving up so many base hits. A lot of it is kind of soft contact, unlucky type stuff, but there's no denying that a lot of guys have gotten on base when he's pitched this year. He has also gotten out of some pretty big jams. So to his credit, there has been some big spots that he's been able to come through, and that makes you kind of think like, oh, like if he could only do this more, like then he'd be one of the best in the game. But he's just not consistent enough at this point. So I would consider him in the, like I was just talking about, he's a good but not an elite reliever at the moment, which when he's your best guy and coming in all the high leverage situations, ideally you want that elite guy, which the Dodgers just don't have right now.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting. I mean, I think, again, we've mentioned it. You and I are both confident that a bullpen acquisition is likely. Now, to what degree? Are we talking about a middle relief type guy? Are we talking about one of the top arms out there? I mean, most people didn't necessarily think the Brewers would be highly competitive this year. They have the best record in the National League. So, Hader, a guy who many people thought might be available, likely to be unavailable. And so we'll have to see. I mean, we'll have to see what arms are out there. Most of the times, you're not going to go find an elite reliever on a bad team necessarily. And so definitely interesting, something to monitor there. But both of us, I would say it sounds like we're both moderately concerned in the short term. I'm more concerned long term than you are. But both of us hopeful that a trade acquisition could shift that. So let's move on to the offense now. An interesting group, an interesting season. We saw a couple weeks of unbelievable numbers. We've now seen a couple weeks of pretty bad numbers. Scale of 1 to 10, how nervous are you? How concerned are you about the offense?
I'd say it's like a 2. I'm not overly concerned. You mentioned it's not like the Dodgers still have, or it's not like the Dodgers have bad players. They just have guys that are slumping right now. And we talked about this on the live show the other night. It doesn't usually happen where every single guy is slumping at once, but that's what's happening here. And that's not going to last 162 games. So they're going to get out of this offensive slump eventually. We already saw, they scored 16 runs yesterday. So maybe that's the start of something. Although we saw at the end of the Red series, they had an 8-run game and then went back to doing nothing in the first 3 games of the Brewers series. But, hopefully Sunday could be a spark. But I'd say if there is concern, it would be the bench. We've seen a lot of their bench guys haven't produced this year. When you talk about Edwin Rios hasn't gotten a hit since who knows when. Matt Beatty is the one guy who's starting to come out of it. He hit a home run yesterday, drove in 7 runs. So he's been hitting really well since he got back from the alternate site. But outside of that, they haven't gotten much out of their bench. But I'd still say I'm not overly concerned. Once everyone's healthy, once you get Bellinger back, once you get McKinstry back, that adds another good bench bat. So I don't think long term, I don't think there's too much concern with the position players.
Yeah, I'm with you. I had it as a 3, and my only concern is, like you said, it's on one hand, I guess I would add health and just saying, hey, now we maybe know how fragile this lineup is. Not in the sense of like guys are likely to be injured, but in the sense of if a guy does go down, there's not necessarily as much depth as maybe we would have hoped for behind them, and then the bench stuff. Just some numbers looking over that stretch of the last 14 games. Guys who have performed well. Chris Taylor has a WRC plus, which basically is just a number. 100 is league average, so big numbers are good, small numbers are bad. His WRC plus is 180 over the last 2.5 weeks. OPS over 1,000. Matt Beatty's WRC 269, so pretty solid there.
Yeah.
OPS of 1.358. AJ Pollock up to 143. Was below 100, but obviously a couple home runs and a double will help you out. Will Smith, 113, so he's been above average. But then below average, you've got Justin Turner, who's evenly average, 100, 681 OPS. Mookie, 95 with a 686 OPS. Seager, 88 with a 672 OPS. Max Muncy, a 56 with 422 OPS. And Gavin Lux with an 8 of 344 OPS. So that's the problem, right? Mookie, Turner, Seager, Muncy, Lux. You have 5 guys who are at best league average and at worst way, way, way below league average. So I don't think I'm worried about Mookie Betts. I'm not worried about Justin Turner. I'm not worried about Corey Seager. I'm not worried about Max Muncy. I think a guy like Gavin Lux, I've got questions about.
Yeah.
Because we had hoped that this would be the turn. He has the injury. He had a great spring, but then he sort of struggles, has the injury, and comes back and is still struggling. So I'm with you. I mean, of those guys, I think Chris Taylor's doing what we expect. AJ Pollock jumping out of his slump is good. Will Smith has been steady. It's just a matter of, like, are you concerned about Mookie, Turner, Seager, Muncy, those 4 guys being average to below average for very long? And I just don't know how you could say yes.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I'm not overly concerned about those guys. Everyone goes through some sort of slump, or most people, maybe not Mike Trout, but most people in a 162 game season, they're gonna struggle for a couple weeks at some point. It's just unfortunate that for all 4 of those guys, it kind of came at the same time, and especially when you consider that another guy that would be in the same category as them, Cody Bellinger, is out right now. Zach McKinstry, who started off the year great, is out right now. So it's just bad timing, but those guys will come out of it. They're too good. They've proven too much in their careers to be concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you mentioned Cody Bellinger, so let's shift gears and go to big deal, no deal, which will be heavily injury related this week.
Yeah.
And let's start with Bellinger. I mean, this is a guy that I think we all kind of hoped and expected would be back soon. We haven't heard many updates, and the latest update, Cody Bellinger's still a ways away from playing. I believe he's not running full speed. I don't know how much hitting he has done. So it seems like an obvious big deal here, but Cody Bellinger's still a ways away. Your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I agree. It's a big deal. This isn't ideal. It's been almost a month now that he's been out. At first you thought it would just be a couple week thing. Then it comes out that he's dealing with a hairline fracture, which is not, the worst thing in the world, but it's also not great, especially when it's in a leg, which he's a good runner. He's fast on the base pass. He plays center field. He gets great jumps on balls, which obviously you can't do with a fracture in your leg. So it's a bit concerning that he hasn't really made much progress. I think, I don't know if it was Dave Roberts, but I think he used the word he's kind of plateaued in his recovery a bit, which isn't great. So who knows when we're going to see Cody Bellinger next? It may be another month. It may be another few weeks at least. So they're just going to have to keep getting by without him. But yeah, that's a perennial MVP candidate right there that's not in your lineup. So it's definitely a bit of a concern.
I'll group these next 3 together. Tony Gonsolin is currently being stretched out as we speak, still 3 to 4 weeks away. David Price, who was initially given a 4 to 6 weeks timeline last week, said he could be closer to the 4-week mark, which would put him about 3 weeks away. And then Brandon Morrow has completely stopped his throwing program. Dave Roberts says unlikely to play this season. So Gonsolin 3 weeks away, Price 3 weeks away, Morrow unlikely to contribute at any point. Big deal or no deal to you?
Yeah, I think all those are a big deal. It's a big deal in the sense of it's good news with Gonsolin and Price. We weren't really sure when we'd see either of those guys. And if you tell me right now 3 weeks, I'll take that. That's not bad at all. We could manage for 3 weeks. And part of that with Gonsolin specifically is it's going to take him time to get built up. They're building him up as a starter. So he's starting to throw now, but he's basically at the beginning of spring training.
Yeah.
It's going to take him those 3 weeks to get built up, at least to the point where he could come up and pitch, 4 or 5 innings in a big league game. So that's good news on him and Price. Morrow, it's unfortunate. It's not like when they signed him, we were expecting to get 2017 Brandon Morrow, but we're hopeful at least. If this guy could get healthy, he's still really good, and he just unfortunately hasn't been able to. Dave Roberts didn't rule it out completely that we'll see him later in the season, but it sounds, pretty unlikely that he's going to pitch this year. And I just feel bad for the person, most of all. He's a guy who's worked really hard. He's, kind of revived his career on multiple occasions, and injuries have just always been an issue for him, ever since he was a top prospect way back in the day.
Yeah.
But he's just always had to deal with injuries. So I feel bad for him. It's unfortunate. And And I hope he could just get healthy at some point and pitch again.
Yeah, I mean, the Morrow story is similar to Jimmy Nelson's in a lot of ways. I think Morrow might be a tad older, but, Jimmy Nelson a year ago, same sort of deal. Like, hey, he's not going to pitch this year, shut down. Everyone's assuming, what does that mean? Probably not good news. Well, Nelson ends up becoming a free agent, re-signing with the Dodgers, and now he's contributing. So I think for a guy like Morrow, at least you can look at a guy like Jimmy Nelson and say, hey, maybe that's the pipeline. Maybe that's sort of the track that I need to be on. On the flip side, he's had a long career. He's had a ton of injuries, so you never know when the end of the road is going to be. I'm with you on Gonsolin. I mean, Gonsolin had a shoulder injury, so if you had told me Gonsolin was going to miss months and not weeks, I would have believed you. I did not. There was part of me that was like, are we even going to see him this year? I mean, a shoulder injury is second maybe only to elbow injury as far as the worst case scenario. So the fact that he's already pitching, that clearly it was a very minor issue, that he's being stretched out, like you said. I mean, if they needed a reliever, he could probably be here in a week or two, but they're just trying to get him up to 5 or 6 innings. And if that's the case, we all know how I feel about Gonsolin. I was arguing he should have been in the rotation ahead of May. That was a mistake based on how May has pitched so far this season, but it's also a reflection of how high I am on Gonsolin. So big deal in a good way on that. And then the price, I would say, the hamstring to me, it was like, well, is this going to be like a 10-day injury and he's just back and they're being cautious? Or is this going to be serious? They give him the 4 to 6 week timeline. Obviously, good news that it's closer to 4 weeks and not 6 weeks. So some good news there. I'll throw one more injury nugget out there. This is from a few days ago, but Chris Taylor made this comment. Quote, he's going to need to manage his back trouble, might not take as many swings before a game to avoid irritating it. I joke about shoulders and elbows being most serious. Back might be third on that list. And Chris Taylor at this point in the season saying, quote, I have to manage back trouble seems concerning to me.
Yeah, I mean, any back injuries are definitely concerning. It doesn't surprise me to hear him say that. Just I've dealt with a couple back injuries, and you could be fine, for a while, and then one wrong move, and you're back to where you were when it was hurting. So it's definitely a bit of a concern, but I think he knows how to manage it. He's a smart guy, and hopefully he could get enough rest and have enough time where he could where it's the issue is completely behind him, where he doesn't have to worry about it anymore. But with a back, it's always in the back of your head that, hey, if I make one wrong move here, like I could retweak it or whatever. I think he was dealing with back spasms or tightness or whatever. So it's never fun to deal with back issues.
Well, and Taylor strikes me as the type of guy who his movements are all sudden, like he's a quick guy.
Yeah.
He runs, he's athletic, he plays aggressively. His swing is on the more violent side of swings, I would say. And so for him to be managing back trouble is not ideal. I'll throw one more out here before we talk divisional stuff and then get to the number 5 starter. Dave Roberts says, quote, it could happen with carrying 3 catchers on the active roster. Quote, I just don't know the timing right now. He added something you and I have talked about. I mean, I guess I'm going to say big news, awesome deal, like simply because apparently at least he's considering it.
Yeah, I mean, it's good that they're considering it. We'll see if that actually happens. I would think that if there was any time to do it, it would be now. Like the minor league season hasn't even started yet, so it's not like Ruiz would be missing out on much. Like he would just be missing out on exhibition games at the alternate site. And also just they're dealing with so many injuries right now that I think it would have made sense. So I would have done it, a week or two ago. Yeah. They haven't done it yet, which makes me skeptical if it'll happen. We'll see, I guess. But yeah, I definitely would love to see Ruiz up here. That definitely adds some depth to your bench. It allows you to use Will Smith, more liberally as a pinch hitter on days that Barnes starts.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's get him up here. Let's see what he's got.
Okay, last one here. The NL West. Giants are 17-11, Dodgers 17-12, Padres 16-13, D-backs 15-13. I'll throw some other numbers at you. Dodgers, as I said, best run differential in the league. Giants are 4th, Padres are 9th, D-backs are 11th. San Francisco 3rd in starting pitcher wins above replacement. Padres are 7th. Diamondbacks 2nd in runs in the league. Big deal or no deal that not only are the Padres competitive, but it sure looks like the Giants and Diamondbacks, at least up until this point, are as well.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see how sustainable that is. It's only been a month. We got 5 more months to go. But yeah, those teams, specifically the Giants and Arizona, they're both playing better than anyone could have expected, which obviously isn't ideal. We would have liked to have some more cakewalks in our division. But yeah, right now the NL West is looking like the best division in baseball. Like I said, we'll see how long that lasts. The Giants haven't played the Dodgers at all. They're going to have to play them 19 times. Same for the Diamondbacks. The Dodgers haven't played either of those
Yeah.
teams. Um, but yeah, it's definitely looking like the division's going to be more competitive than we originally thought.
Or maybe that's the reason the Dodgers are 17 and 12, Daniel, because they've gotten to avoid the Giants and the Diamondbacks so far on their
Yeah,
schedule, you know?
it's
No,
possible.
I'm with you. I mean, I think we believe the Padres are going to be there at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I think the Giants probably were third on that list as far as who we thought would finish in the division. And then the Diamondbacks are the surprise. I mean, that roster is not very good at all. Carson Kelly, the catcher, has been really good. They've got a couple guys, you know, obviously Bumgarner has been atrocious and then throws a fake no-hitter. Which is very on brand for him. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a weird division because the Giants and Diamondbacks are just unique teams, and it'll curious to see. I mean, I don't think either of us would bet on either of those two teams finishing in the top two in the division at the end of the year, but 17 and 11, 15 and 13, the Diamondbacks had won like 9 of 11 at one point. All definitely something to take into account. So, okay, well, let's get into the number 5 starter stuff. Again, Daniel and I went live on Saturday night. Dustin May came out of the game after 1 2/3. Appears to be, what did they say, a right arm injury. It's like, thanks for the breaking news update there. None of us saw that coming. Not even scheduled to get an MRI until today, I believe, in Chicago. So we should have more information in the next day or two. But as we're recording this, I think the assumption is, obviously he's on the injured list, so he's going to be out for a couple of weeks. I think you and I are probably assuming, everybody is probably assuming that we're talking about months and not weeks with the type of injury he had. I think the hope is, man, can we even get him back this season, depending on what it is. Dave Roberts has indicated, you and I talked about it in real time on the show, the schedule kind of sets up nicely. They have 3 off days and an 11-day stretch. So they don't necessarily need a number 5 starter immediately, but we just mentioned Gonsolin is still 3 weeks away. David Price is 3 weeks away. And even when those guys are ready, you know, do you just throw them straight back into the rotation? When we say Price is 3 weeks away, that's probably being built up to a reliever. So I'm not sure David Price is being considered for a starting position. I would say Gonsolin is the favorite. But until Gonsolin is back, they might need 1 or 2 starts out of a number 5 starter. And so I've got a list of names here of guys that could be in consideration. These are in no particular order. These are all players that are on the 40-man roster. Andre Jackson is one option. He's a 12th round pick from 2017, 25 years old. Justin Lorber, our friend, future Dodgers, has him as the number 18 prospect in all of the Dodger system. 2019, his last minor league season, he pitched an A-ball, was really good. 3 ERA, 141 strikeouts, 114 innings. Looked pretty good in a few appearances in spring training. Number 2 option, Mike Kickham, debuted in 2013 with San Francisco, played in 2014 for 2 games, didn't make the majors again until 2020. Poor guy has a career ERA of 10.10.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, I think it went up yesterday. So unfortunate for Kickham. Honestly, like just an aside on him, he gets added to the 40-man roster. I understand people are like, why is this the guy? Honestly, I think it's just because they're going to have no issues DFAing him at the end of this. Like, I just think they wanted to put a guy on the 40-man roster. They didn't want to waste option years, yada, yada, yada. I think that's why Kickham was the guy. Mitch White, 26-year-old. He was a second-round pick in 2016. Career Major League ERA of 0.00 and 7 1/3 innings. 4.1 innings this year has been good. Number 20 prospect in the system. Kind of a weird career. Again, second-round pick. Dominated in 2016 and 17. 2018 and 2019, he was pretty poor. Jimmy Nelson, potential candidate. Obviously, 9th in Cy Young voting back in 2017. Makes just 3 starts between 2018 and 19. Misses all of 2020. He's been okay this year. 3.75 ERA in 12 innings pitched. Has allowed 19 base runners, 17 strikeouts. Weird stat, he has 4 wild pitches already this season. The thing for him, he only has made 1 appearance of 2 innings and 1 of 1.1 inning. Everything else is 1 inning or less. Some other prospect-y type names, Edwin Uceda. He got the quote-unquote start last week, 27th rate prospect according to Justin Lorber. Pitched in Double-A in 2019, was pretty good. Lorber lists him as, quote, a back-end starter, middle relief type. Gerardo Carrillo, the 22nd ranked prospect on the Dodgers prospect list, on the 40-man roster. Lorber's scouting report, electric arm with pitch mix to start. Command and frame issues leave me thinking his future is probably in relief, high leverage relief. Has not pitched above high A. 2 other names to mention, Dennis Santana, 4.70 ERA in 7.2 innings this year. 7 strikeouts per 9, 6 walks per 9. Kind of an up and down year. 2018 was really good. 2019 roughed up. 2020, he's never really put it together at the major league level. And then the last one, Josiah Gray, top pitching prospect, top prospect in the Dodger system. But Dave Roberts has said he's not ready yet. I would say I'm not an expert. Spring training sort of confirmed that. He's still a year or two away. So I just threw a bunch of names at you. Again, Jackson, Kickham, White, Nelson, Uceda, Carrillo, and Santana. If you were in charge, as you're evaluating that kind of thing, who would you put as the number 5 starter for 1 or 2 starts?
Yeah, it's hard to say because a lot of those guys have been at the alternate site, to start the year, and we don't know what they've looked like. Yeah, and last year too. So we don't know what a lot of these guys are looking like right now. We don't know how built up they are. But what I will say is from the guys you listed that we've seen pitch this year, I've kind of liked what I've seen out of Mitch White. He's only made a couple of appearances, but he's looked pretty good. Like you said, he's had success in the past, maybe not recent success, but at one point he was a much higher rated prospect than he is now. But I think that's a guy who could come in, make a few spot starts, give you a little bit of length. Who knows how many runs he'll give up? I'm not expecting him to be on the level of the other Dodgers' other 4 starters and have an ERA in the 2s while also giving length. But he's the guy who's looked the best out of that bunch to me. Jimmy Nelson has looked a lot better as of late, but I don't think he's not built up at all. Like, he built up during spring training, and then, like you said, he's only been throwing 1 inning per outing, at most 2 innings. So he's not built up, whereas Mitch White was at the alternate site and has had a chance to get, a little more built up.
Yeah, Mitch White, I think, seems to be the most obvious. Before we recorded, I texted Justin Lorber and kind of asked him about Jackson and then what he would do. And White is the guy that he mentioned. White's career is interesting. As I said, second-round pick from Santa Clara back in 2016. Came in 16 and 17 and was really, really good across lower levels. I think he was probably, a top 10 prospect in the system at that point. 2018, 4.5 ERA at AA. 2019, 5 ERA across AA and AAA. For him, there's been a lot of injuries, a lot of weird stuff going on. I don't know the full story. I just know that's kind of the label that has come with him. He's been good at the major leagues. I mean, that's the thing. You see a guy like Santana who has been really, really good in the minors at various points, and just whenever he comes up, it's a mess. Mitch White, small sample size, 7 1/3, but no earned runs. As you said, he's looked pretty good. And so for him, it feels like the type of guy where if he's healthy, the talent was always there. And we've seen it. He's already up at the major league level. As you said, he's stretched out. So for me, it would probably be White. Jackson would be the second one. I mean, I understand he's a position player, converted. He pitched at the University of Utah. He's 25 years old, number 18 prospect, as I said, hasn't pitched above A ball, which is a weird thing to say because obviously in 2020, he probably would have been AA, maybe even AAA. Right. As well as this year. I don't know where he's been assigned, but he's on the 40-man roster. I thought he looked pretty good in a couple appearances in spring training. He would be the other guy for me. I asked Lorber, I said, what do you think? Like, can he be a guy? He said, I think he'd be fine for 3 to 4 innings. They've got a couple guys. If he's shoving at the alternate site, basically, why not? So I think White would make the most sense. Jackson, for me, I think I saw enough out of Uceda, who clearly they had above Jackson, to say, hey, 2 innings pitched, 2 earned runs. Like, it wasn't great. It was kind of a mess. And again, Lorber says he's a back-end starter, middle relief type. So the upside is not necessarily there. Kickham, I think, could be considered just because he can eat innings for you. I don't know. I don't think anybody was impressed by what they saw yesterday. Obviously, it's a weird situation to come in as a pitcher. I'll give him a little bit of a break. If you heard the story, I mean, Dustin May basically gets hurt at about 5 p.m., 5:30 p.m. West Coast time. He has to get to Milwaukee for an 11 a.m. start the next day. So, I mean, you do the math. He was in Arizona at the alternate site. So he flies through the night. Who knows what time they figured out that was the guy they wanted. They fly him overnight into Milwaukee. He comes into a game that the Dodgers are up by 15 runs. So it's sort of like, just throw strikes, don't walk anybody. Exactly. But he could be the guy. I would say those 3, obviously Uceda is probably the 4th. Some combination of those 4. Santana, again, was stretched out, maybe, is not anymore. And Carrillo we haven't seen, so I would be surprised if he's ahead of Jackson. So I guess the question is, I mean, if you need 2 starts out of somebody on that list, are you worried at all about that, Daniel?
No, I'm not worried at all. Just because, if you have one bad game, the next 4 days you got aces going. Yeah. I know the Dodgers haven't been playing well as of late and haven't been winning many of the games. Even those guys are starting, but I still think you trust those guys to go out and give you length in their starts and quality as well. So if you have, one bad outing once every 5 days, like, it's not the end of the world. And like you said, it's only a short-term type of deal. Like, they won't need a fifth starter for 11 days because they have a bunch of off days. So they'll be able to go with 4 starters for a while here. And then we mentioned how Gonsolin's going to be back in 3 to 4 weeks. So like you said, it's probably only going to end up being like 2 starts in there.
Yeah.
And if they're bad ones, so be it. But yeah, I think ideally, you bring in a guy who could give you some sort of length, give you 4 to 5 quality innings. So you avoid taxing the bullpen. And I think just right now, Mitch White is the best equipped to do that.
Yeah. And again, he's already up there. We've already seen him pitching at the major league level, and he's been competent there. Again, 4 1/3 innings this year, scoreless, 3 innings scoreless last year as well. So there you go. That'll do it for us today. We got a lot to talk about, obviously. The summary here, we're not concerned at all about the starting pitching, even with the number 5 starter in flux. I think good news with Gonsolin being back in about 3 weeks. So with the with some days off and that kind of thing, the Dodgers might only need 1, maybe 2 starts from a number 5 starter before Gonsolin. The bullpen, there is some moderate concern, both now and long term. I think both of us are kind of hoping for and banking on the Dodgers bolstering that group at the trade deadline at some point. We know they have the prospect equity to do so. And then the bats, we're not worried. I think we're a little bit worried about the back of the bench. We're worried about depth, but we're not worried about Mookie and Turner and Seager and Muncy being below average hitters for an extended period of time. So we appreciate you joining us. Daniel and I, like I said, we've got the Cubs this week. And then the Angels at the end of the week. Daniel and I will be here live for a post-game show, I think Friday. Stay tuned to Twitter at DodgerBlue1958. We'll keep you updated there. DodgerBlue.com for all the latest news and updates. Of course, we're waiting eagerly for some Dustin May updates. We'll have that for you. DodgerBlue1958 everywhere on social media here as well. That's Daniel Starkand. I'm Jeff Spiegel. We appreciate you joining us. As always, Vin Scully.
The best team holding a trophy high in the air. The Los Angeles Dodgers, champions of the baseball world.